These guys legitimately save coral and save the coral reef. Hi guys, we are here at the Reef Institute in West Palm Beach. I'm here with Executive Director Lenita Hicks and Mike Tavares of also here from the Reef Institute. These guys legitimately save coral and save the coral reef, and their job is incredibly important. So I'm going to let them speak, and we're going to drive the conversation after that. Lenita, tell us what you guys are doing.
Sure, super excited to share what we do. So the Reef Institute was founded in 2016 on a mission of coral conservation through education, research, and restoration. So we call it the rescue to reef model. It's a full circle. So if you kind of envision a circle, we start and end with education. And then we work in restoration efforts. So we work in land-based gene banking, spawning, coral spawning, and then we settle those babies. And the goal is to put those babies back out in the ocean. We work across the Caribbean, and then we work in innovation with artificial reefs that we affectionately call the wave tiles.
That's terrific. Tell us about the reef in Florida, what's happened, when's the next planting? You know, tell us some exciting things.
So I'm going to start with the destitute side of our reef across the Caribbean, and then really bring you the hope. So on the destitute side, the reality is in 2014, a disease called stony coral tissue loss disease was first detected in Virginia Key off the coast of Miami. Not the first disease corals have ever gotten, but what is really interesting about this disease is a couple of things. First of all, it affects about half of all of the reef-building species in Florida, and it's a very fast-moving disease with a high mortality rate. So the way that you can look at it is once it enters into kind of a single coral polyp, so one coral animal is called a polyp. When they multiply, that's a colony, and then when you have lots of different types of coral together, that's when you get your reef. So it enters into that single polyp, it goes into the whole colony, and you can have a coral that's 20 to 50 years old gone in a matter of days. It's super fast moving. And they don't really know a whole lot about the disease except that it's waterborne. That's what they know. There's a lot of theories out there and how it responds to amoxicillin treatments that a lot of people have heard about. But the reality is the only thing we all know for sure is that it's carried on the water. What has happened as a result of that, along with all of the other issues that typically affect our reefs globally, climate change, global warming, people, we're not always good to the ocean, is that this has left Florida with less than 2% of our original coral coverage. Across the Caribbean, 5 to 6% of our original coral coverage. So let's put this in a contrast. So 97% of all wave energy is first absorbed by a coral reef. So any place that is close to a coral reef, their first line of defense from hurricanes or any large wave action are those reefs as they're alive and continually building themselves. But once they start to die and not rebuild, they erode, and that wave energy is not stopped. So you look at it, 2% left, 97% of wave energy. Florida and across the Caribbean, we're in trouble. We're about to be underwater if somebody doesn't do something.
Don't buy land here yet.
No, no, no.
Wait for the flood.
So as everyone's looking at the last two hurricanes that came through Florida and doing the math. But here's the really awesome piece of it. There is hope. There are organizations around the country really working actively together to make strides to fix this issue. The ocean is a big place with lots of different pieces going on. That's why I love the ocean. NOAA estimates only 20% of the ocean has even been explored. But the reality is if you have lots of organizations working together, we can fix this. It's not an easy fix, but we can. So that's what we do at the Reef Institute, is we're working to actively fix that problem. So
interesting enough, when we were taking a tour through the vats, they were showing us some of the rarest corals on the planet that look sort of like ugly galaxia, and the story is just unbelievable about those pilot corals. That you guys had to gene bank them and like Noah's Ark.
So pillar corals are virtually extinct in the wild. It's one of the first corals that gets the disease. So anytime the disease is detected in a nation, it's one of the first corals to go. I've actually seen pillar corals dying in the wild, and it's the saddest thing you've ever seen. You have these brilliant pillars that are thousands of years old, and you're literally watching their skin peel off the skeleton. It's devastating. It's a devastating thing to behold. And so what Florida started to do was something called it was originally called the Florida Coral Rescue Project. In the last year, to kind of add in spawning and kind of growth, they renamed it the Florida Coral Rescue and Propagation Project. The idea behind it originally was to bring in zoos and aquariums that were part of the AZA, the American Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and to just bring in corals from the wild, and they called it gene banking. Let's put them in a Noah's Ark in different facilities across the country, so if everything dies in the wild, they're at least somewhere. There are only three of us in the 20+ organizations holding corals that are holding the rarest type of coral called Dendrogyra, or pillar corals. And so we have 87 of them. We actually, us and Florida Aquarium, hold the most of that type of coral, and the only other organization that holds a great amount of that coral is the Frost Museum. So it's not even that, and the other thing that's unique about our coral holding is we, to date, hold about 26 different species of corals that have been rescued. So, and that number is actually growing as we're scaling to receive more corals. So like, we should have gotten more corals. We were supposed to get 90 more corals in October. That got pushed back because of hurricanes, but the next month we'll have 90 more colonies, and in that increasing the types of coral that we're holding.
So as we walk through the systems, we saw everything from huge rescues to just born colonies from their spawning. How old were those ones that were in the circle?
Just a couple months.
Some of them were just born in August.
Yeah.
Newborns.
But the one thing that was clear was all the equipment was very recognizable to me, and all hobby grade equipment, and that's why they brought on Mike as the chief aquarist. Mike, just give us a little bit about your role and how the hobby is helping scientists.
So I've been in it for close to 30 years now as far as hobby aquarium keeping. And
by the way, apexes, 2-part dosing, radion lights. This is nothing out of the ordinary, guys.
we use all of the exact same equipment.
Exactly.
The exact same equipment. Just like he said, apexes, radions, dosers, vortex. It's all the same stuff, and it's the same stuff that I've been using, fixing, implementing for many years. And the big thing is as hobbyists, we're just really familiar with these. We choose to spend our free time using this stuff. And so working with scientists is kind of amazing because I can keep the tank steady, I can grow the coral, and then our scientists that we work with can give me the data that we need to grow them faster, spawn them, frag them. Just, it's a real hand-in-hand.
Yeah, so Mike, it looks like the hobby has invaded the conservation world. Tell us a little bit about growing in a coral in a box and how this hobby has made a difference to these scientists.
So we use all of the same stuff. It's pretty incredible. The exact same hobby equipment that we've been using for many years: vortex, vectors, apexes, radions. It's all the same exact equipment that we use to grow the Caribbean coral. It's all stuff that we've been doing in our homes in our free time, now the really encouraging thing is that like, for instance, this organization has allowed me to come in and help with their systems and use these technologies that we're so familiar with in the hobby world to grow these endangered corals, get them to spawn, frag them, and eventually put them back out in the ocean. It's all stuff that we really have a firm understanding of because we've been buying them and fixing them for many years, and there's really no difference. There's no specialty conservation piece of equipment. It's all the same skimmers, same pumps, same lights that we're all super familiar with using. So there's a lot of benefit to having somebody more in the advanced end of the hobby, whether that be in guys that have been vendors before or worked for big facilities, offer a lot of benefit to the scientific community to be able to implement the same stuff.
And this is, Mike, at the end of the day, the scientists and the community, they studied an open system in the ocean. They never studied or even took a class on a glass box and what happens inside. Tell us about, maybe Linnea, tell us about what were some of the things that prior to Mike joining and Aquarius getting involved, like how were you guys killing coral? Like what were you doing? Blasting it with light, not enough nutrition? What were some of the mistakes?
Well, when you take in rescue corals, there's no space to kill coral. So, I mean, I think that's the biggest difference is that, you know, one of the things we talked a lot about in our conversation and walking through is that we were the first organization to become part of this project that was a true nonprofit. What I mean by that is, yes, aquariums and zoos are nonprofits, but the other two nonprofits involved in this project have been around for 25, 60 years. They've been doing this for a long time. So we literally had to build our systems, and we had 6 pieces of coral that we kept alive for 3 years. It literally felt, we'd bring people through, and it was kind of like seeing the house with the, you know, that you keep saying it's got good bones in it, because we'd have all these beautiful systems and all this equipment. It would literally go, and they're alive, they're still alive. But as we began to build trust, and a huge piece was that we had a veterinarian on staff that specializes in coral, and his background was in aquarium science, so aquarium science and veterinarian, you know, marine veterinary specialty. Really, the tension point for us came with, as we were being trusted with more coral and these super sensitive corals, our veterinarian needed to not have a dual role. He needed to just be a veterinarian. And so in interviewing a lot of people, what we found was that scientists are scientists. They want to ask a lot of questions, and we have a phenomenal scientist on staff that helps us with all our data collection, helps us with answering all of the right questions. Like, you know, Michael asked the question, well, what helps the babies grow? And she'll go, okay, well, we need to look at PAR, and we need to look at feeding, and we need to isolate this, and that's wonderful. But in the day-to-day care, it was moving beyond what we could handle, and a scientist couldn't, I'm just gonna be honest, a scientist couldn't help me with that. I needed to find someone that had the expertise in aquarium care. So we joked about it when we were talking before. Our first question in all of our interviews as we started looking for an aquarist was, what is the most expensive piece of coral that you've killed? Because we wanted to know if anybody who has stood in front of an aquarium, and I've been there, with, you know, 50 to 100 gallons of water on the floor, and you can't figure out the source of, is it your pump, is it your standpipe, like what is it, and you're sobbing, you know, if you haven't been there, then you don't know. And so we had a lot of people who meant really well, but for us to go to the scalability level that was needed in rescuing more corals, breeding more corals, getting those babies ready to, it is a massive effort that is needed when we talked about the hope to get babies back out in the ocean. Right now, the plan for the adults is that they will stay on land to be bred so that their babies can restore the ocean. That scalability needs expertise. And so to make that happen, we had to hire the right person to kind of partner with our veterinarian and our scientists.
And do you guys use the natural seawater here, or do you guys?
No, actually we use instant ocean.
Use instant ocean.
We want to control as many variables as we can.
So Dr. Gregory was telling me that those pile of corals that they found, that the DKH had to be below 8, 7, 7.5.
He was talking about the pH.
Yeah, the KH, right?
Yeah, the KH,
Yeah.
Yeah, why?
So
They just
naturally,
that's the natural seawater, and
Right.
they can't. These other corals do better in higher maybe KH in the
not
aquarium.
necessarily. So in the hobby world, one of the things, it's a question I used to get regularly, is what's the perfect parameter?
Yep.
There isn't one. The perfect parameter is stable. Don't let the parameter
Don't stay- yeah.
change. Right. Don't let them change. But if you go out here and you test the water, you're going to get about 7.8, 7.6 to 7.8 in the alkalinity.
Yep.
And that's where we try to. That's my target. Always in all of these systems. But even in my personal systems that I've had, my target was still always about 7.8. You can run systems higher than that safely. I've seen it done a million times. I've seen tanks running up near 10 in the alkalinity that are healthy. Not Caribbean tanks, but I've seen Pacific tanks doing it. The biggest thing is that it doesn't change, but I've personally found that running at a lower alk, below 8, tends to give me my best color, my best growth, my best polyp extension, and I'm not towing that fine line of disaster. You can run at 10, but suddenly at 10.5, you may start to have some issues. Whereas running at 7.8, I have a cushion. If it gets above 8, things might not be thrilled, but nothing's dying yet. And lower is always safer.
I asked you this before, but let me ask it again. Being a hobbyist and taking care of a tank that you can wipe out and you can go in a store and buy it again.
Yeah.
But coming here, tell me a little bit about your role where now
A lot of pressure, right?
You're taking care of endangered species.
Yeah, you asked it like how many did we kill before him? I was like,
Right.
no, don't kill any more.
No, it was just like what have you learned about growing
Yeah.
coral in box
Yeah.
relative to what the open system guys? One of it is what
One
you
of
guys
it's
keep your
definitely-
phosphate and nitrates a little higher than
Yeah.
than the natural water.
Right, if you go and test the ocean, you're going to get 0 in
Right.
nitrate and phosphate.
Right.
Most hobbyists know that 0 is a recipe for disaster.
Tough, yeah.
To maintain. So I like to keep the red field ratio in the tank. My ideal is about 10 nitrate and about 0.1.
Yeah, that's where we keep our system.
0.1 on the phosphate, and everything seems to feed and grow and color really well at that number. But dropping it down to 0, when I actually first got here, they were at 0, and everybody was keeping the coral alive, but it was a frantic scramble to keep everybody alive. Where I wanted to be proactive and not reactive, is the way I
Right.
wanted these aquariums.
So the proactive, are you going above and beyond, maybe doing ICP testing? There's a lot of talk about
Pretty
the
regularly.
bacteria testing right
Yep.
now. Because you have endangered species at the end of the day. You're not
Right.
going to kill a small tank.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're not only being a keep it simple, stupid, like old school reefer kind of way, just put some.
But they're also
and-
using science.
and calcium
You have
reactor,
to-
but you're also saying, hey, I also got to make sure I'm not losing these corals.
Oh, absolutely. We send out regular ICPs on
Okay.
different systems. We pick a few systems a month to send them out. Same ICP test the hobby uses. We
Yep.
use the same exact one.
Right.
I buy a 6-pack on BRS and,
Right.
and then send them out. And that's our standard thing. Like I do run these systems very simply, the way a lot of other people do. I prefer manual tests. We do have a Trident, but the Trident is the backup, my manual test.
Trend.
Yeah,
So
it's a trend spot.
we have a part-time staff person that comes in and just does water quality. She was in today. That's all she does.
4
is
days a week.
4 days a week is water
Talk to us
chem.
about, so I feel like Florida, Connecticut, from what Andrew and I are seeing when we're talking to some folks from the phone and everything standpoint.
Yeah, a lot of
You
education.
have a lot of education. You have a lot of amazing people like here in the back, scientists and some interns and things of that sort. Like how does that work out for what you guys are doing here?
It's actually pretty amazing. So we have a lot of amazing interns, and as more senior interns that really understand aquariums and really get to know them, one of the things that I've done recently is I've assigned entire systems to these interns. So they come in and they have their tank, just like you have your tank at home, they have their tank. And so the cool part about that is when they're responsible for one system, it's just the corals
They're
and
babies. They're ownership.
Yeah.
You saw
You get to
someone
know
was
them.
in today. So
At the end of the day, it's like my father's handed me my first account to run
Yeah.
and the hedge fund. Like
Yeah.
you know, like you gotta give
He's not
someone a
gonna give you the
little
whole
bit of
business.
responsibility
Yeah.
and say go.
But
So we're
it's
in-
too much. There's too many corals in the whole facility for everybody to look at everything.
Right.
I want focus. I want them to get to know their animals. I want these interns to come in and say, "Hey, Mike, this one's a little bit paler than when I saw it on Monday."
Yeah.
And that's proactive.
Right.
I can jump ahead of it before it becomes a problem because you guys know by the time it's a problem, it's a really big problem.
well,
And,
what
and it's
we're
less overwhelming than, hey, take care of 10 tanks and do this one element and share your
and we had been, I mean, to talk about what we learned before Mike came, that kind of had been our model was, okay, let's teach everybody everything. And the idea behind that was that if something broke, somebody, you know, everybody could fix something. I mean, what we're really seeing as Mike's gone to this model of, we have 4 different interns that take on a different system. You saw one of them come in today. She was not on today. She was off today. She said, I have to come in and see my system. Like, it's my day to come in and see my system. Just because I'm off today, I have to come in and look and make sure there isn't anything that I need to do. And had there been something she needed to do, she would have stayed longer to get it done. And that's what we're starting to see, is these are their babies, and it's kind of helping to take it to that next level, and us getting more help and really being able to handle more. And we have to handle more.
I really appreciate the tour and this talk, and thank you so much, and see you guys on Monday at the presentation. FAU presentation on Monday, and part of that presentation will be conservation, and particularly a little Florida history for the locals here to make it even more interesting. And we learned a lot, and glad we came.
Thanks, man.